3 method for working with chaos. The main point of this method is to dissolve the dualistic struggle, our habitual tendency to struggle against what's happening to us or in us. This method instructs us to move toward difficulties rather than backing away. We don't get this kind of encouragement very often. We practice to liberate ourselves from a burden, the burden of a narrow perspective caused by craving, aggression, ignorance, and fear. We are burdened by the people with whom we live, by ongoing daily situation, and most of all by our own personalities. Through practice, we realize that we don't have to obscure the joy and openness that is present in every moment of our existence. We can awaken to basic goodness, our birthright. When we are able to do this, we no longer feel burdened by depression, worry, or resentment. Life feels spacious, like the sky and the sea. There is room to relax and breathe and swim, to swim so far out that we no longer have the reference point of the shore. How do we work with a sense of burden? How do we learn to relate with what seems to stand between us and the happiness we deserve? How do we learn to relax and connect with fundamental joy? Times are difficult globally. Awakening is no longer a luxury or an ideal. It is becoming critical. We don't need to add more depression, more discouragement, or more anger to what's already here. It is becoming essential that we learn how to relate sanely with difficult times. The earth seems to be beseeching us to connect with joy and discover our innermost essence. This is the best way that we can benefit others. There are 3 traditional methods for relating directly with difficult circumstances as a path of awakening and joy. The first method we'll call no more struggle, the second, using poison as medicine, and the third, seeing whatever arises as enlightened wisdom. These are 3 techniques for working with chaos, difficulties, and unwanted events in our daily lives. The first method, no more struggle, is epitomized by Samatha Vipassana instruction. When we sit down to meditate, whatever arises in our mind we look at directly, call it thinking, and go back to the simplicity and immediacy of the breath. Again and again, we return to pristine awareness free from concept. Meditation practice is how we stop fighting with ourselves, how we stop struggling with circumstances, emotion, or moods. This basic instruction is a tool that we can use to train in our practice and in our lives. Whatever arises, we can look at it with a non-judgmental attitude. This instruction applies to working with unpleasantness in its myriad guises. Whatever or whoever arises, train again and again in looking at it and seeing it for what it is without calling it names, without hurling rock, without averting your eyes. Let all those stories go. The innermost essence of mind is without bias. Things arise and things dissolve forever and ever. That's just the way it is. This is the primary method for working with painful situation, global pain, domestic pain, any pain at all. We can stop struggling with what occurs and see it through faith without calling it the enemy. It helps to remember that our practice is not about accomplishing anything, not about winning or losing, but about ceasing to struggle and relaxing as it is. That is what we are doing when we sit down to meditate. That attitude spread into the rest of our lives. It is like inviting what scares us to introduce itself and hang around for a while. As Milarepa sang to the monster he found in his cave, "It is wonderful you demons come today. You must come again tomorrow. From time to time we should converse. We start by working with the monster in our mind. Then we develop the wisdom and compassion to communicate sanely with the threat and fear of our daily life." The Tibetan yogini Pema Chodron was one of who fearlessly trained with this view. She said that in her tradition, they didn't exorcise demons. They treated them with compassion. The advice she was given by her teacher and passed on to her student was, approach what you find repulsive, help the ones you think you can't help, and go to places that scare you. This began when we sit down to meditate and practice not struggling with our own mind. The second method of working with chaos is using poison as medicine. We can use difficult situation, poison as fuel for waking up. In general, this idea is introduced to us with Tonglen. When anything difficult arises, any kind of conflict, any notion of unworthiness, anything that feels distasteful, embarrassing, or painful, instead of trying to get rid of it, we breathe in it. Three poisons are patient. These include craving or addiction, aggression, and ignorance, which include denial or tendency to shut down and close out. We could usually think of this poison as something bad, something to be avoided, but that isn't the attitude here. Instead, they become seeds of compassion and openness. When suffering arises, the Tonglen instruction is to let the storyline go and breathe it in, not just the anger, resentment, or loneliness that we might be feeling, but the identical pain of others who this very moment are also feeling rage, bitterness, or isolation. We breathe it in for everybody. This poison is not just our personal misfortune, our fault, our blemish, our shame. It is part of the human condition. It is our kinship with all living things. The material we need in order to understand what it is like to stand in another person's shoes. Instead of pushing it away or running from it, we breathe in and connect with it fully. We do this with the wish that all of us could be free of suffering. Then we breathe out, sending out a sense of big space, a sense of ventilation of freshness. We do this with the wish that all of us could relax and experience the innermost essence of our mind. We are told from childhood that something is wrong with us, with the world, and with everything that comes along. It is not perfect. It has rough edge. It has a bitter taste. It is too loud, too soft, too sharp, too wishy-washy. We cultivate a sense of trying to make things better because something is bad here, something is a mistake here, something is a problem here. The main point of this method is to dissolve the dualistic struggle, our habitual tendency to struggle against what's happening to us or in us. This method instructs us to move forward toward difficulties rather than backing away. We don't get this kind of encouragement very often. Everything that occurs is not only usable and workable, but is actually the path itself. We can use everything that happened to us as the means for waking up. We can use everything that occurs, whatever is our conflicting emotion and thoughts or our seemingly outer situation, to show us where we are asleep and how we can wake up completely, utterly, without reservation. So the second method is to use poison as medicine, to use difficult situation to awaken our genuine caring for other people who, just like us, often find themselves in pain. As one Lojong slogan say, when the world is filled with evil, all mischief, all difficulty should be transformed into the path of enlightenment. That's the notion engendered here. The third method for working with chaos is to regard whatever arises as the manifestation of awakened energy. We can regard ourselves as already awake. We can regard our word as already sacred. Traditionally, the image used for regarding whatever arises as the very energy of wisdom is the carnal ground. In Tibet, the carnal ground were what we call graveyard, but they weren't quite as pretty as our graveyard. The bodies weren't under a nice smooth lawn with little white stone carved with angles and pretty words. In Tibet, the ground was frozen, so the bodies were chopped up after people died and taken to the carnal ground where the vulture would eat them. I'm sure the carnal ground didn't smell very good and were alarming to see. There were eyeballs and hair and bones and other body parts all over the place. In a book about Tibet, I saw a photograph in which people were bringing a body to the carnal ground. There was a circle of vulture that looked to be about the size of 2-year-old children, all just sitting there waiting for this body to arrive. Perhaps the closest thing to the carnal ground in our world is not graveyard, but a hospital emergency room that could be imaged for our working basis, which is grounded in some honesty about how the human realm functions. It smells, it bleeds, it is full of unpredictability, but at the same time, it is self-radiant wisdom, good food, that which nourishes us, that which is beneficial and pure. Regarding what arises as awakened energy refers our fundamental habitual pattern of trying to avoid conflict, trying to make ourselves better than we are, trying to smooth things out and pretty them up, trying to prove that pain is a mistake and would not exist in our lives if only we did all the right things. This view turned that particular pattern completely around, encouraging us to become interested in looking at the carnal ground of our lives as the working basis for attaining enlightenment. Often in our daily lives we panic, we feel heart palpitation and stomach rumblings because we are arguing with someone or because we had a beautiful plan and it is not working out. How do we walk into those dramas? How do we deal with those demons, which are basically our hope and fear? How do we stop struggling against ourselves? Pema Chodron advised that we go to places that scare us. But how do we do that? We are trying to learn not to split ourselves between our good side and our bad side, between our pure side and our impure side. The elemental struggle is with our feeling of being wrong, with our guilt and shame at what we are. That's what we have to be, friend. The point is that we can dissolve the sense of dualism between us and them, between this and that, between here and there, by moving toward what we find difficult and wish to push away. In terms of everyday experience, this method encourages us not to feel embarrassed about ourselves. This is nothing to be embarrassed about. It is like ethnic cooking. We could be proud to display our cherished matzo balls, our Indian curry, our African American chitlins, our Middle American hamburger and fries. There is a lot of juicy stuff we could be proud of. Chaos is part of our home ground. Instead of looking for something higher or purer, we're with it just as it is. The world we find ourselves in, the person we think we are, these are our working base. This carnal ground called life is the manifestation of wisdom. This wisdom is the basis of freedom and also the basis of confusion. In every moment of time, we make a choice. Which way do we go? How do we relate to the raw material of our existence? These are three very practical ways to work with chaos: no struggle, poison as medicine, and regarding everything that arises as manifestation of wisdom. First, we can train in letting the storylines go. Slow down enough to just be present, let go of the multitude of judgment and sins, and stop struggling. Second, we can use every day of our lives to take a different attitude towards suffering. Instead of pushing it away, we can breathe it in with the wish that everyone could stop hurting, with the wish that people everywhere could experience contentment in their hearts. We could transform pain into joy. Third, we can acknowledge that suffering exists, that darkness exists, that chaos in here and the chaos out there, that is basic energy, the play of wisdom. Whatever we regard our situation as heaven or as hell depends on our perception. Finally, couldn't we just relax and lighten up? When we wake up in the morning, we can dedicate our day to learning how to do this. We can cultivate a sense of humor and practice giving ourselves a break. Every time we sit down to meditate, we can think of it as training to lighten up, to have a sense of humor, to relax. As one student said, lower your standard and relax as it is.